The courtroom buzzed with a low murmur, thick with expectation and quiet mockery. Polished shoes, hushed gasps, and glances loaded with judgment filled the air like static before a storm. Everyone turned as the side door creaked open, and the defendant entered, not in a suit, not even with a lawyer beside him. Just a slim black teen in a plain beige t-shirt and dark jeans, his hands tucked into his pockets like he didn't care. Thane Riker, age 18, looked like someone who had wandered in off the street. No tie, no briefcase, no apology in his eyes. "Defendant Riker, stand before the court," barked the bailiff, his voice gruff with disdain. Thane walked slowly toward the defense table. People shifted in their seats. Someone in the gallery snickered. And then, like a rusted hinge creaking open, the judge finally leaned forward. Judge Halvorn Vexley, a man who looked carved from stone, narrowed his eyes. His silver hair gleamed. Beneath the courtroom lights, his black robe neatly pressed. He tapped a finger against the desk, studying Thane as one might a bug that scurried in unexpectedly. "You think you can outsmart me?" the judge said, the words slicing through the silence. Laughter rippled across the courtroom. Not loud, just enough to let Thane know they were all in on the joke. The court reporter smirked behind her keyboard. The prosecutor, slick-haired and smug, didn't even look up from his files. This was routine to them. Another lost kid, another easy conviction. But Thane didn't blink. He stood still, unshaken, scanning the courtroom like he had already measured every inch of it. From the crooked frame above the jury box to the silent girl sitting 3 rows back. The one with the sharp eyes and silk blouse, watching him with something that wasn't mockery. Leora Vance, the judge's personal intern. She tilted her head at Thane, not mocking, not amused, curious. "Mr. Riker," Judge Vexley drawled, looking back down at the file, "charged with felony trespass, obstruction of justice, and possession of a controlled substance. That's quite the portfolio for a teenager. You do know where you are, don't you?" Thane tilted his head slightly, his tone level, even bored. "Los Angeles County Superior Court, Courtroom 3D, under your jurisdiction, presided over by Judge Halvorn Vexley, former prosecutor, appointed in '08, known for your 92% conviction rate and your, how did the Times put it? Unshakable confidence in your own judgment." The judge blinked. The gallery fell dead silent. Even the prosecutor, Vincent Cade, looked up now. Vexley's voice dipped lower. "So you read my bio. Big deal." "I read your rulings," Thane said softly. "All 1,172 of them." A cold tension bled into the room. The public defender assigned to Thane stood and cleared her throat. "Your Honor, my client has expressed an interest in—" Thane held out a hand. Calm, measured. The public defender hesitated, looked to the judge, then quietly sat back down. "I'll represent myself," Thane said. "Excuse me?" "Judge." Vexley leaned forward. "You heard me. You're not qualified. I'm aware I'm not licensed. But the Sixth Amendment guarantees me the right to self-representation, as long as I do so competently." Ferretta v. California, 422 U.S., 806, 1975. Silence. Judge Vexley's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the prosecutor, who gave a half shrug, as if to say, "Let the boy embarrass himself." "You'll be treated as an attorney," Vexley finally said. "That means no special treatment, no excuses. You screw up and I won't save you." "I wouldn't expect you to," Thane replied. "You've never saved anyone like me before." A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Vexley opened the folder again, this time a little slower. His tone changed. slightly. Still hard, still condescending, but not completely dismissive. We'll proceed. Opening statements. We'll begin after a short recess. You'll have until then to gather your thoughts. As the judge stood and the gavel struck once, Leora rose from her seat. Her gaze didn't waver. As everyone moved around her, she kept looking at Thane. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He already knew he had just changed the temperature of the room, and no one, especially not the man in the robe, was ready for what came next. The recess bell echoed like a breath of relief. The gallery spilled into hushed whispers. Leora didn't move. She sat still, her legs crossed, watching the defendant. No, not a defendant anymore. A strategist. A quiet storm in a plain t-shirt. Thane Riker stood at the defense table, leafing. Through the case file the public defender had abandoned like a lost cause. His fingers moved fast, his eyes faster. The prosecutor, Vincent Cade, returned from recess with a smirk tugging at his lips. He adjusted his cufflinks as if preparing for a formality rather than a fight. "Hope you enjoyed your little performance," he muttered, passing Thane. Thane didn't respond. Not with words, just the barest flick of a smirk. Not disrespectful, but knowing, as if the game had already started and Vincent hadn't realized he was 2 moves behind. Opening statements. Begin. The court resumed. Judge Vexley tapped the bench twice. We'll begin with opening statements. Prosecution? Vincent Cade stood, slow and rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, pacing with the lazy confidence of a man who had delivered the same speech 100 times. "Today's case isn't complicated. A break-in, a stash of illegal pills, a suspect caught inside the building, with no alibi and no explanation." He walked past the jury, pausing to look at them like old friends. "The defense will try to confuse you, twist your attention. But the facts remain." He returned to his seat, folding his hands with theatrical finality. Judge Vexley looked to Thane. "Your turn." Thane stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. No notes, no hesitation. Just his voice, low and even. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you've already made up your mind based on how I look or what I wear, I understand. I've spent most of my life in rooms like this, where people assume things before I open my mouth." He paused, not because he forgot his next line, but because silence made them lean in. "I'm not asking you to believe in me," he continued. "I'm asking you to pay attention, because the truth in this case isn't hidden. It's just been ignored." The judge shifted. Leora did too. Cross-examination sparks. The first witness was called Officer Brandel, the arresting officer. "Vincent, can you confirm the defendant was found inside the warehouse?" Brandel: "Yes, near the east stairwell, holding a flashlight and a plastic bag." Vincent: "And what was in the bag?" Brandel: "Oxycodone, about 20 pills." Vincent nodded like he had just scored. No further questions. Judge: "Defense?" Thane rose. No papers, just presence. "You said you found me near the east stairwell?" "Yes." "What time was that?" 2:46 a.m. "And the warehouse cameras, they were functioning?" "Yes." "Internal footage was submitted into evidence." Thane turned to the jury. "Would you be surprised to learn that I appear on camera entering the building 5 minutes after the man who placed the drugs there?" Vincent stood. "Objection. Defense is assuming facts, not in evidence." Thane didn't flinch. "Your Honor, I'd like to admit new time-stamped footage into evidence. Security footage from the rear lot, received this morning via subpoena after my request. It clearly shows a man, 6'3", white, hoodie, slipping inside the building at 2:40 a.m. Judge Vexley raised an eyebrow. How did you get that footage? I filed the motion at 9:01 a.m., Thane said, the moment recess was called. There was a stunned silence. Judge Vexley gestured reluctantly. Let the record reflect. The defendant acquired new evidence within the scope of discovery. Vincent's jaw tightened. Leora's spark, Leora Vance, sat upright now. Her eyes hadn't left Thane in 10 minutes. Her fingers toyed with the edge of her notepad. But she hadn't written a word. Not since Thane took over. The way he dismantled their witness. The way he wielded the law like a scalpel, not a hammer. He wasn't a boy with a cause. He was a storm they hadn't forecasted. The court shifts. By the time Officer Brandel stepped down, the jury had shifted in their seats. Doubt had entered the room like smoke under a door. Judge Vexley frowned. His voice was flatter now. Defense, any more witnesses? Not yet, Thane replied, but I will be calling someone unexpected tomorrow. Who? Thane smiled faintly. Someone this court forgot about. The owner of the building. Vincent stood abruptly. Your Honor, I object. Vexley raised a hand. He's playing by the rules, Counselor. Sit down. Thane didn't look at anyone as he returned to his table. He didn't need validation, but as he sat, a folded piece of paper caught his eye. Leora's handwriting. Just 2 words. Don't stop. He didn't intend to. The morning air inside the courtroom felt heavier than the day before. As people filed back in, the whispers were different now, not mocking, but uncertain, cautious. Thane Riker sat alone again, but something had shifted. He wasn't just a curiosity anymore. He was dangerous. To the system. And everyone could feel it. Judge Vexley walked in 5 minutes late. No explanation. His mouth was a hard line, but his eyes lingered on Thane for a half-second too long. Across the aisle, Vincent Cade kept flipping the same folder open and closed. He was sweating through his designer suit. But Thane? He just sat there, elbows on, the table, fingers laced under his chin like he was already reading the verdict. And Leora Vance. She wasn't in her usual chair behind the bench. She entered late, from the side, quietly. Her silk blouse now tucked tighter. Her hair swept up. She took the observer's seat behind Thane, close enough that he could feel her presence. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Judge Vexley leaned forward. Mr. Riker, you said yesterday you'd be calling the building's owner. Thane stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. The court calls Mr. Ellison Gray. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a tan blazer walked into the courtroom, sunglasses tucked in his collar, nervous energy in his steps. He didn't look like a landlord. He looked like a man with something to lose. Under oath, Ellison fidgeted. Thane circled slowly, never raising his voice. Mr. Gray, do you own the warehouse on Langford Avenue? Yes. Are you aware illegal activity has occurred on your property? Ellison hesitated. I was told about the arrest, but I don't allow. Who holds the spare keys to the east stairwell? I do. And the building manager, Luis Gutierrez? Yes. Who's currently under investigation in an unrelated burglary charge, correct? I think so. The courtroom leaned in. Mr. Gray, Thane said, stopping in front of him, did you know that Officer Brandel's brother-in-law is Luis Gutierrez? Dead silence. Vincent stood up. Objection! Irrelevant! Thane didn't even turn. Your Honor, I'm establishing motive and collusion between arresting officer and property manager. Judge Vexley's lips pressed into a line. Proceed. Vincent sat down, pale. Thane didn't need theatrics, just the truth, layered like a trap. Luis had access. He had the keys. And he had a relationship with the officer who filed the report that placed me inside a warehouse I'd never entered before that night. He turned to the jury. There were no fingerprints, no surveillance inside the stairwell. Just an assumption. And assumptions, he said, scanning their eyes, are what make innocent people disappear. The bombshell. Then Thane reached into his file folder and pulled out a transcript. Your Honor, he said, this document is a formal confession Luis made during a recorded phone call from county jail just 2 nights ago. He told his girlfriend. He planted something in the stairwell to settle a score. He didn't mention my name, but he didn't have to. The date and time match this arrest. He handed the papers to the bailiff. Vincent tried to protest, but his mouth opened and closed like a man drowning underwater. The judge read, page by page, and his hands began to tremble ever so slightly. When he looked up, he wasn't glaring. Anymore, he was calculating. Anything further? Judge Vexley asked. Just one thing, Thane said, turning slowly to face the prosecution table. Why did the arresting officer's report mention I was found holding the pills when the evidence log clearly says they were discovered 3 feet away? Vincent didn't speak. He couldn't. Your Honor, Thane said, now facing the bench, I rest my case. Leora moves as the jury was dismissed for deliberation. A slow burn rippled under the courtroom floor. Everyone could feel it, but Thane barely noticed. Because now, finally, he turned around and saw her. Leora, standing, watching. Her eyes held something different now. Not curiosity, not fascination, desire. She walked over, slowly, her heels muted against the marble. You memorized all of it, didn't you? She said under her breath. Every angle, Thane replied. I watched you tear their whole house of cards down. Hapui raised an eyebrow. Did I impress the judge's intern? She leaned in, whispering so only he could hear. You made me forget who I was supposed to root for. Her breath brushed his jaw. Electric. She slipped a folded paper into his hand. Room 607. Tonight. No court. No rules. Then she turned and walked away, hips swaying with silent confidence. Thane watched her go, and this time he smiled like a man who already knew how the next case would end. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the system to do something it rarely does. Admit it was wrong. The jury filed back in, a few clutching their notebooks like anchors in a storm. Their faces were changed. Less skeptical. More respectful. Even Judge Halvorn Vexley sat back differently now. Straighter. Humbled. His gavel rested in his hand, but he didn't strike it. Not yet. Has the jury reached a verdict? He asked. The forewoman stood. We have, Your Honor. The case of the people versus Thane Riker. We find the defendant not guilty on all charges. A collective exhale passed through the gallery. A murmur. Then silence again. But not from the judge. He finally spoke. Slower now. More careful than anyone had heard him all week. Mr. Riker, when you entered this courtroom, I judged you before you opened your mouth. Thane said nothing. I assumed your appearance reflected your ability. Your background reflected your intentions. That was my error." He looked around the courtroom. "And it's not the first time this court has made that kind of error. But today, you didn't just defend yourself. You reminded us all what justice is supposed to mean." He paused, his voice lowered. "And if you ever apply to law school, list me as a reference." A few gasps, a few nods, but Thane didn't smile. He just gave a small, respectful nod, not for the judge's sake, but for his mother's, who wasn't here to see it. The gavel finally came down. Case dismissed. Outside the courtroom, the doors flew open, and the hallway swarmed with reporters, cameras, lights, microphones shoved forward like weapons. "Thane, how does it feel to beat a career prosecutor? Did you plan everything yourself? Are you really not even in college yet?" He said nothing, just kept walking, cutting through the noise like it didn't matter. But just before he reached the exit doors, he stopped. Because she was there, Leora Vance, leaning against the wall like a secret he hadn't opened yet. The silk blouse was gone now, replaced with a black sweater and jeans. But her eyes hadn't changed. They still burned, quiet and intense. "You didn't text," she said. "You said no rules," Thane replied. She smiled, the kind that bent the room slightly around it. "You want to get out of here?" she asked. "Depends where we're going." "My place," she said. "You've spent 2 days inside a courtroom proving you're a man." She stepped closer, her voice a breath against his skin. "Now, let me treat you like one." The apartment, Leora's apartment, was quiet, elegant, filled with soft light and expensive books. A record played something smooth and slow in the background. But Thane didn't notice much, because the moment the door shut behind him, she turned and kissed him. Not like she'd been waiting all day, but like she'd been waiting all year. No courtroom rules, no arguments, just heat. Her fingers were at the hem of his shirt, pulling it off with a hunger disguised as calm. He lifted her easily, pressed her against the wall, their breaths tangled in the space between tension and release. But it wasn't lust alone. It was validation, victory, fire earned through war. Later, when they finally collapsed onto her bed, the room dim and heavy with quiet, she traced her fingers across his chest and whispered, "You really memorized over 1,000 rulings?" 1432, he murmured, half smiling. She laughed against his skin. "God help anyone who underestimates you again." The final word. The next morning, Thane stood alone in front of the courthouse, a beat-up backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside, it was his own copy of the California Penal Code. Annotated, highlighted, worn through the spine. He looked up at the courthouse building like a man no longer on the outside. Then he pulled out his phone and opened an email. Subject: Law Fellowship Application Accepted from Dean Walcott, LA City Law School. And below it, a note. "Your court performance made it to my desk. We've never accepted a candidate without a degree. Until now." Thane smiled. Not because the battle was over, but because now it was just beginning. Only this time, he wouldn't be in handcuffs, he'd be in control.